Imagine a nation of more than 120 million people, one of Africa's fastest-growing economies, and a proud ancient civilization, yet completely cut off from the sea. That nation is Ethiopia. Since losing its coastline in 1993, Ethiopia has been trapped, forced to depend on its tiny neighbor Djibouti for almost all imports and exports. Now, imagine if that landlocked giant suddenly found a way back to the Red Sea. Not only would Ethiopia's economy be transformed overnight, but the balance of power in the Horn of Africa, and indeed the world, would shift dramatically. But here's the twist. The superpower that made this breakthrough possible is not the United States. It's not even China. It's India. Yes, you heard correctly. India has stepped in, outmaneuvering the USA, and struck a partnership with Ethiopia that has stunned Washington and left the West scrambling to catch up. This is not just about Ethiopia's trade routes. This is about global shipping, oil security, military power, and the fight for influence in one of the world's most strategic regions, the Red Sea. Stay tuned, because on Easy Africa we are about to break down exactly how India pulled off this shocking win, why the Red Sea matters so much, how America miscalculated, and what this means for Africa's future. The Red Sea is not just another body of water. It is a lifeline of the global economy. It stretches over 2,200 kilometers, connecting the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal in the north to the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the south. Every single day, oil tankers, container ships, and naval fleets move through this corridor. It is estimated that nearly 10% of global trade and about 6.2 million barrels of oil per day pass through the Red Sea. That's nearly a third of all oil transported by sea worldwide. Now think about what this means. If the Red Sea is blocked, even for a few days, the global economy could lose billions. We saw a small glimpse of this in 2021 when the container ship Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal. In just 6 days, global supply chains went into chaos. Imagine if an entire country or a powerful navy were to control access to the Red Sea. That is why the world's superpowers fight tooth and nail for influence here. The United States has a major military presence in Djibouti, home to Camp Lemonnier, its largest permanent base in Africa. China, recognizing the importance of this region, built its very first overseas military base in Djibouti in 2017. France, Japan, and even Italy maintain troops there. Saudi Arabia and the UAE also see the Red Sea as their backyard and are investing heavily in ports, naval bases, and infrastructure. For India, the Red Sea is both a challenge and an opportunity. About 70% of India's crude oil imports come from the Gulf region, much of it passing through these waters. Any disruption could cripple India's energy security. By aligning with Ethiopia and gaining a strategic foothold in this corridor, India ensures that it isn't just a passive observer, it becomes an active player. Ethiopia, for its part, knows that the Red Sea is its lifeline. Without access, it spends over $1.5 billion annually in port fees to Djibouti. For a developing country, that's an enormous burden. Access to the Red Sea is not just an economic dream, it's a matter of survival. Ethiopia's problem is unique. Unlike many other African countries, Ethiopia was never fully colonized. It remained a proud, independent empire, defeating Italy at the famous Battle of Adwa in 1896. But when Eritrea gained independence in 1993 after decades of war, Ethiopia lost its coastline overnight. That loss turned Ethiopia into the world's most populous landlocked nation. A country of 120 million people, with one of the fastest-growing economies on the continent, suddenly became dependent on its neighbors for survival. Djibouti, a tiny nation with a population of less than 1 million, became Ethiopia's lifeline. Over 95% of Ethiopia's trade flows through Djibouti's ports. The road and rail links from Addis Ababa to Djibouti are some of the busiest in Africa. But this dependency has always been fragile. Ethiopia pays huge transit costs, and any political tension could disrupt its economy. The search for alternatives has been long and frustrating. Ethiopia once looked to Eritrea again after peace was declared in 2018, but relations quickly soured. It considered Sudan, but instability and sanctions made that difficult. Somalia was another option, but decades of conflict made long-term deals nearly impossible. So Ethiopia's dream of accessing the Red Sea remained exactly that, a dream. Until now, India's intervention has brought that dream within reach. The Red Sea corridor is not just Ethiopia's problem, it's a global obsession. For the United States, the Red Sea is about protecting global trade and maintaining dominance in energy supply lines. Washington believes that whoever controls the Red Sea effectively controls Europe's connection to Asia. For China, the Red Sea is a vital link in its Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing has invested billions in African ports, railways, and industrial parks. The base in Djibouti allows China's Navy to operate far from its shores and secure shipping to and from Africa. For the Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the Red Sea is a strategic backyard. It's about food imports, oil exports, and regional power. That's why they've been heavily investing in Sudan, Eritrea, and Somalia. And for India, the Red Sea represents both a vulnerability and an opportunity. Vulnerability, because India's oil lifeline depends on these waters. Opportunity, because by supporting Ethiopia, India gains a partner in a region that America and China have dominated for decades. India's calculation was simple. The U.S. takes Ethiopia for granted. America uses its military bases to project power, but it hasn't solved Ethiopia's biggest economic problem, sea access. By stepping in where Washington failed, India has outplayed the superpower on its own chessboard. For decades, the U.S. has treated the Horn of Africa as a security theater. Washington's focus was on counterterrorism, piracy, and military presence. The establishment of Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti symbolized this. From there, the U.S. launched operations against al-Shabaab in Somalia, monitored Yemen, and kept an eye on Iran. But while America focused on military power, it ignored Ethiopia's economic needs. U.S. aid often came with political conditions, and when Ethiopia faced internal conflict, Washington imposed sanctions instead of offering solutions. This created frustration in Addis Ababa. India saw the gap. Instead of preaching politics, New Delhi offered investment, trade, and infrastructure. Where the U.S. saw Ethiopia as a security risk, India saw Ethiopia as a partner. The result? Washington woke up too late. By the time America realized Ethiopia was shifting its alliances, India had already positioned itself as the country's economic lifeline. India has been quietly building ties with Africa for decades, but Ethiopia is special. It is home to the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, making it the diplomatic capital of the continent. For India, winning Ethiopia's trust means influence across Africa. Over the past decade, India has become one of Ethiopia's top trading partners. Bilateral trade crossed $2 billion, with India exporting pharmaceuticals, machinery, and technology, while importing agricultural goods. But India didn't stop there. It invested in Ethiopia's education, healthcare, and technology sectors. Thousands of Ethiopian students study in Indian universities. Indian companies run farms, factories, and IT centers in Ethiopia. And now, India has stepped into Ethiopia's most sensitive issue, Red Sea access. By offering financial backing, diplomatic support, and infrastructure expertise, India positioned itself as the partner Ethiopia always needed. India's strategy can be summed up in 3 words: respect, patience, partnership. Unlike the U.S., which often dictates terms, India listened. Unlike China, which loans money at high interest, India offered softer terms and joint ventures. Unlike Europe, which hesitated because of Ethiopia's conflicts, India engaged directly. By aligning with Ethiopia's dream of Red Sea access, India gave the country something priceless: hope. The USA, focused on its own security interests, never saw it coming. Washington assumed its military bases guaranteed influence. But power today is not just about soldiers, it's about trade, ports, and economic lifelines. India understood that, and that's why New Delhi has shocked Washington with this win. Together, India and Ethiopia are now working on new trade corridors that link Addis Ababa with Red Sea ports, infrastructure projects like railways, dry ports, and highways, diplomatic support in African Union negotiations, technology partnerships in IT and healthcare. This isn't just a bilateral deal, it's a model for Africa. Ethiopia gains leverage, while India cements its role as a trusted global partner. India's success with Ethiopia is not just about one country. It's about Africa's future. If Ethiopia secures Red Sea access with India's help, other African nations will notice. They will see that alternatives exist beyond America and China. This could spark a new era of South-South cooperation, where countries of the global South support each other without relying on Western powers. Washington, shocked and scrambling. The U.S. underestimated Ethiopia's desperation and India's influence. Beijing, concerned but cautious. China already has Djibouti, but India's presence reduces Beijing's monopoly. Moscow, opportunistic. Russia may try to partner with Ethiopia too, but India has already taken the lead. If Ethiopia gains direct Red Sea access, the results will be transformative: lower trade costs, more independence from Djibouti, stronger economy, a new role as a regional power. With India's backing, Ethiopia could finally escape its landlocked trap. This is bigger than just Ethiopia. India's victory is a symbol of Africa's changing alliances. For decades, the continent was caught between the US, China, and Europe. Now, countries like India are showing that there's another path: partnership without dominance. Africa doesn't have to choose between East and West. With allies like India, it can chart its own course. Ethiopia's dream of Red Sea access is no longer just a dream. With India's support, it is becoming a reality. And in the process, India has shocked the United States, challenged China, and redrawn the map of global power in Africa. This is a turning point, not just for Ethiopia, not just for India, but for Africa as a whole. Here on Eazicho Africa, we will keep following this story as it unfolds. Because what happens in the Horn of Africa will shape the future of global trade, energy, and diplomacy. So ask yourself, if India can outsmart the USA in Ethiopia's Red Sea strategy, what's next? Could this be the beginning of a new world order where Africa holds the keys? One thing is certain: the world is watching, and Africa is rising.